Thanks everybody for coming out. It's great to see so many faces, familiar and new, and it's great to see so much interest in distribution here in Silicon Valley. It's like I have not seen in my entire career, and I'm very happy about that. I think a lot of that is in part due to this growth hacking name. The label is relatively new. I think it came out about 2 years ago. Sean Ellis busted it out in a blog. It got popular this spring, really. But it's resulted in a lot of new attention to distribution space on the web, and I'm really very happy about that and what it's brought. The actual work and the kind of work that's involved in growth hacking I don't think is all that new, but it's great to have a label and attention to it. In fact, most of what I'm going to talk to you about today was actually developed, at least I learned it, from a bunch of folks at a company called NextCard in the late 1990s. But I'll say it's just as applicable today as it was then, and I haven't seen anything that's worked better for me anyway. So we joke at NextCard that this was the playbook and that we just keep going and applying the same playbook to different companies and industries. And when I see growth hacking label come up, I think it matches very much what NextCard was trying to do. So I've gotten to do this and practice this at a half a dozen companies or so myself now, but I've also been fortunate to get to practice with dozens of other companies with some of my friends' funds, whether they're venture or incubator funds. And it's been a great benefit for me to do that and to sit down and exercise sort of laying down process with a number of different environments and industries. And through all that time, I've gotten a lot of really common questions and similar questions over and over again. And what I tried to do is distill those things here so that I can pass them along. I hope that you find them helpful. The quick background, Austin said, yeah, I worked at Boeing before there was an internet. I worked there for 7 years before there was an internet. I was very fortunate because while I was there, Boeing was learning Japanese manufacturing techniques. So statistical process control, continuous quality improvement, lean manufacturing, even Kanban. And they were teaching that to me while I was there. It inspired me so much, I went and I got my master's degree in manufacturing systems engineering. So I'm really a process guy and have been from the beginning. But I did write code at Boeing for 7 years, designing, testing, and simulating new aircraft designs. My intro to internet, when I finished my master's degree, internet was here, and I jumped over as a product guy. And I was fortunate to build a lot of customer acquisition products. And some systems at the time and even processes of acquiring customers that were back then new. I think we built the first affiliate system that was ever made back at NextCard. Now that's normal. I know that's just another normal channel. But so I was fortunate to learn how a lot of those systems work. And eventually I became the product and marketing guy, so to speak. And I wandered along as this very technical product and marketing guy that was into data and writing code. And for a lot of years with a small number of really big fans of the practice and the process. And then recently growth hacking took off. And all of a sudden there are a lot of people interested in this sort of merger of marketing and code. And so like I say, I'm excited about that and I'm glad to be here talking about it. First I wanted to talk about some of my axioms. Some of my understanding or ways of looking at the world or framing the world in the space that I work in that I talk about with people at every company that I'm going to for the most part. There are three legs to the startup stool for me: technology, product, and distribution. And a lot of folks are really good at getting the technology and product part right and finding that product market fit. But a lot of folks really fall down when it comes to distribution. I think I've seen an overwhelming belief. Some people joke that if you build it, they will come. It's the Field of Dreams quote that's there. But I think the real belief is that if you build the best product, you will win. And I'm just saying, I don't think it's true. By definition, whoever built the best distribution won. Sometimes you have the best product, and that's a good tool for you to use to build the best distribution, but you don't have to. I would argue that if you had the best product, but you weren't distributing, and you had a competitor right in your space next to you that had a best distribution team, that you would lose. And I can point to lots of examples of that over history. The most famous one is like Betamax and VHS, although a lot of people probably don't even remember those days of magnetic media. But more recently, I'll pick on one company because it's fun to pick on big companies, right? So who's better? No, I'm not picking on you. So which one was better, Netscape or Internet Explorer? Which one was better, Lotus 123 or Excel, if you remember that far back? What was better, WordPerfect or Microsoft Word? Can I even go Mac OS or Windows? I don't know. But at any rate, it's a case where good distribution has won a lot of markets over and over repeatedly.
How about Google?
I'm not picking on anybody that big. Another common theme, one that I hear a lot, the distribution plan is virality. That's the new distribution plan. And I'm here to say unicorns and viral supernovas are just about equally common in the wild. There are a few viral supernovas, it does happen, but you need a really high concentration of market. There aren't many products out there whose target market is everyone, or even half of everyone, or even a fifth of everyone. Most people have a vastly smaller target market, which means when you're out there trying to get distribution, the concentration of your market in the space that you're trying to get the word out is going to be small. It's going to be hard to get the nuclear chain reaction started if you don't have the right concentration. And so I've always advocated that the scale marketing tools that we built for consumer space back when, they existed way before there was virality. And that you should build your plan around those kinds of tools. They existed before enterprise was popular in the Valley like it is now. But I'm here to tell you, and I think we demonstrated at Practice Fusion, and other places have certainly demonstrated as well, that those same scalable consumer tools are applicable in the enterprise market as well. So I would build my plan around those tools. If you can find virality greater than 1, by all means, take advantage of it. But I wouldn't build my plan around it. Another axiom, learn to fail. Learn to fail fast. Most ideas won't work. My personal benchmark numbers, I expect about 75 to 90% of all the things that I try to fail. And a lot of people think I'm pretty decent at this. But I can't tell you how many times I've walked into startups and they've said, well, we wanted to A/B test. We heard we should A/B test to optimize. And so we spent a month getting our A/B testing in and getting our segmentation to work and getting the front end for both spots built and then putting the metrics in place and the instrumentation so that we could measure it. And 2 months later, the test results said A and B were just equally good. Neither was better. And we just spent 2 months to find out that neither is better. And we never want to test again. And so I'm saying plan to fail, learn to fail from the beginning. And just plan failure right into your process. So what that means is make failing cheap, make failing fast, and make it pretty painless. And fail, get over it, learn what you can from it, and go on and try the next thing. Change. Change is a big reason why I think growth hacking as a label is getting good traction right now. New channels and even entire new platforms are exploding faster than they ever have before. The tools that we're making right here in Silicon Valley are enabling people to start new companies, new platforms, new means of interactions, and new products like we couldn't do in the late 1990s when we were building up giant server rooms full of boxes to take advantage, to serve out the static HTML that we were serving back then, right? It's a different world now, and because of that, it takes a different kind of distribution person. My examples that I threw out there for recent entire new platforms that we have, social, mobile, even tablets didn't exist 5 years ago. And now they're massive media with massive opportunity. Pinterest and Groupon didn't exist that long ago either. And likewise, some of the properties that were popular back in the late 90s when I got started, the AOLs, Yahoo's to pick on another big dog, and MySpace, don't have nearly the influence and aren't nearly the opportunity that they used to be in the late 1990s to get distribution. And so we need processes that are static, but that are flexible and can accommodate different mediums, different ways of measuring, and can take these in flexibly. This is my last axiom, and then I think I go into how I like to start building stuff. But this is the only 2 charts any startup needs before they're going for their B-round funding pitch, right? if you haven't pitched a lot of VCs, when you go in, you don't really want to show your deck, right? That's death. You have to show these two charts, but all the words on your deck, you don't want to do that. You can tell the story about your people and the competition and the problem that you're solving without showing any charts. And that's usually what you want to do. But these two charts, if you can show them, will pique people's interest all the time. And if I can, any startup that I'm working with, I will try to coax into making these two charts look really good for their company, because it spells success. And even at a big company like Atlassian, if we can build these two charts, we're in good shape. So the first one is the acquisition exponential curve. This is also called the up and to the right chart. It's pretty basic. Customers. The x-axis is always months. I don't know why. It just is. What everybody always wants is the exponential. If you're linear too early in the game, you're only going to get so big. So showing the exponential as long as you possibly can to as large a scale as you possibly can is always a good thing. The other chart isn't quite as common, unfortunately, although I'm seeing it more and more, but not enough. And so I wanted to make a point of putting it in here. Cohort curves, I don't know if you've worked with them before. If you worked in financial services, they call them vintage curves. They think their vintages of financials are like wine, I guess. So I drew lifetime value. That's sort of the conceptual right one or the top one. A lot of times at startups you can't measure that, so it ends up being revenue or engagement if you're pre-revenue or something like that. But conceptually, you're putting lifetime value on the y-axis and months as a customer on the x-axis. And so I'm going to take this bottom curve, for example, right? I'm going to pretend it's 10 months long. So these are all the customers that we brought on 10 months ago. This is their initial purchase price, so to speak, if I can use e-commerce terms, right? Initial purchase was here, and then over time they came back and they bought more and they continued to engage with us, and their lifetime value went to here over time, so they were worth more than the initial. Well, cohort curves you want to go up and to the left, because here's our customers we brought on 4 months ago. And if you can design these things, engineer these things to go up and to the left, we got higher initial purchase price, and we have a steeper curve going here. And in fact, after 3 or 4 months of this curve, we're almost even with our 10-month curve from before in this conceptual case. And if you can come in with those two curves, like the money knows what those are, you'll be in good shape. So now, onto the machine. So how to build the machine with which we can test. We need to test because most of our ideas are going to fail. And because most of our ideas are going to fail, we need to test quick, cheap. I say dirty just because my point is there's not time to clean and polish everything perfectly before you release it. Have a bias towards releasing and getting things out. Often you'll find out things move the needle, and then you can go back and polish and invest more effort in those things. But sometimes you'll throw something out that you think is pretty radical, and you'll get crickets. And at least you haven't wasted a lot of effort from your visual design team polishing that thing that isn't going to work out very well. So the idea of continuous improvement says that we can always incrementally apply a little bit more effort to the things that we should, and we can let go of the things that didn't work without feeling like we've lost too much opportunity cost yet. The machine also almost always has front-end flexibility. The front end is a lot easier to change than the back end typically. You can fake a lot of things in the front end, and I'll give some examples of that later on for sure. But you can fake a lot of back end changes in the front end that you didn't really do, and then have people running around stuffing envelopes and sending mail and do a manual back end if it works out for you. And you can always go back in and build the back end later if you find out that it works, so that you've hit a nerve. Standardizing reporting is important. If every time you run a new test, you have to go out and rebuild custom reporting to read the results of that test, it's going to be too painful and expensive to run each test. So ideally, you want standardized reporting, and that's why I try to break down to those two most important curves. You want to roll up to those, right? Now, if you're at a software company and your margins are crazy high, like I was saying earlier, you might not have to worry about LTV. You might be able to say revenue. Revenue's good enough, right? Cumulative revenue per customer in my curve. But my point is to distill down to as few things as you can and build a standardized report card on it so that every test that you come up with, whether it's from a viral email campaign to a Facebook contest to a video that you're throwing on YouTube where you pop corn with mobile phones, all those things can be measured with a standard report card. All those things can be instrumented, and the report card just comes out automatically, zero effort from you, zero incremental effort for each new test. Then you just put all the effort into this with one standard report card up front. So distill down to as few things as you can. I try to distill to those 2 if I can. And then lifetime value is the other one. If you're in distribution world and you do want to spend money for conversions, you can find lots of people to take your money. They don't care if your conversions will ever result in any profit or benefit to your company or any long-term engagement either. And so you have to measure that for yourself. And you always need to measure lifetime value for that reason. A lot of people come in using Google Analytics, and Google Analytics likes to obfuscate your world once the conversion happens, right? But what they want to do is group everybody into the upfront tag. These people came in through search, say, from this ad group. And then once the conversion happens, they say, great, there's your CPA. But the fact is, you might be willing to pay double that CPA if you knew that you were going to make back triple later. But you're not going to be able to measure that if you can't join across the conversion event. And Google Analytics likes to obfuscate it. There are tricks to get around that. I'm not sure if they're within Google's EULA or not. But it wasn't built for that. I'm starting to see other tools come out that are built for that. Me, honestly, historically, I've used Apache server logs, and I've built simple database straight off the server logs. I've always been surprised nobody's gone out and productized that. But I haven't seen a really great productization of it, at least that got a lot of traction and got going really well. The feedback loops. So I want to talk about that acquisition exponential chart first, because it breaks down pretty easily and pretty straightforward. And honestly, with an earlier stage company, that's the one you care about more. There's always a trust that we'll figure out how to monetize it later if we can just get engaged users here. And so normally I break down to bring in eyeballs in the door. So how much volume can we get? And that's going to be one feedback loop, right? And so we're going to go out. When I say it's a feedback loop, I'm looking for continuous improvement here, right? You have a set of things that you do every month to bring eyeballs in the door. You're going to do those every month. But then regularly, and my goal is for each person in the growth group to try 2 new things each week, right? So in my perfect world, each week, everybody in the group can try 2 new ways to bring eyeballs in. You keep doing the old ones, you try the 2 new ones, you see if you can get any that work better than the old ones. You can see if you can get any in scalable spaces that'll work better. You're doing it quick, cheap, and dirty, so you might have to go back and polish some after they work, but that's my normal sort of goal and metric and how I like to try to work out with it. The second place is in the conversion funnel. This can be one team working both of these feedback loops, by the way, or it can split into different teams. Happy either way here. But conversion funnel, same space. This is where A/B testing goes on. So this is when somebody's at your site. How many will you convert into being users? And same thing there. My ideal cadence is a couple tests a week for a person to sort of look after and manage. I think it's hard to get much faster without an exorbitant amount of effort trying to build ultimate and infinite flexibility. But if you're slower, you're learning too slow. And somebody that's learning at that speed will pass you. So most of my marketing teams, there's a reason I'm at the Agile marketing meetup, right? Run like a Kanban team. And so these are simple. These are hard to read back there. I apologize. But simple categories, right? To do. So this is the backlog queue. In development or in progress, and completed. This is a little bit of a simplistic view, but in my real world view, you're trying to prioritize a backlog list. There's a group that you're working on today, this week, hopefully a couple for each person in the group. And then there's the ones that are done. And for all of them that are done, I'm sharing that standard bare minimum report card variables for all of them. I'm also tracking them through. If it was a plan to bring eyeballs in, I'm also following through for all the ones that are complete to see what does the LTV look like for these folks. Because I might have stopped using that marketing method because it looked like it was costing too much to bring eyeballs in that way. But if I find out that they're earning like crazy or they have huge virality whereas other channels don't, it might be worthwhile to revive them and pull them out later. And so the to-do list is actually, it's a spreadsheet with numbers in it. The other thing that happens is over time, you might get better at conversion. you might become more and more known in your market and in your space, and so conversion naturally will work better because people already know about you, or you get more spillage out of all the work that you do. And so you might be able to go back and pull things out that didn't work a year ago, but do work now. The market could just pick up pace of adoption, and that can help you in there too. I like my reporting on the in progress, and also remember in the in progress, all of our standard run the engine things are in there too. All the continuous improvement. There's this core of things that we're doing all the time. And those are in the reporting as well. And in the ideal world, it's daily reporting, right? So I like to come in each morning and see how all the different channels and campaigns are doing, see what the new ones look like. I like to get contracts with vendors if they're paid media that I can shut off in a day. If it's not paid media, most of the work's usually in the setup. Just let it run. Just see what happens. Watch the numbers come in. But it's a fairly simple system, and that makes it flexible. So you can throw all kinds of different channels into it. You can measure them all the same. You can measure them apples to apples against each other.
Paul,
yeah?
How do you balance the number of people going through versus being able to make a decision of statistically significant number of people in each bucket for each test, and then how long you run the tests for? I mean, those are 2 a week works if you've got volume. If you don't have a lot of volume, it becomes much more difficult.
The question was how to figure out sort of how much volume to put into tests and when to start and stop tests on the flow. And if you don't mind, Mark, I'm going to defer it because I have a slide coming on exactly. That's one of the common questions. Another common question is, for paid marketing, how much should I spend on this? And so, as is typical of me, I want a simple theme, easy to understand, I hope. So I have to keep my world straight somehow, and this is one of the ways how. But I usually try to say, hey, what do you think about a 12-month break-even, right? And there's a couple reasons that I think there's a lot of conservatism built into a 12-month break-even. For one thing, I'm usually looking at what a 12-month curve looks like looking backwards. And so if you remember the cohort curves, I hope that my cohort curves going forward are going up. And if I'm using 12 months looking back and I'm spending that much, I'm pretty confident that I'm going to make even more money going forward. So I have some baked-in return there. For another thing, this typically when you're looking at returns from a channel, you're looking at only what's directly attributable. But always, if you run an email campaign, for every direct response that you get through the campaign, you're going to get 40% that spill over and come in as unattributable brand traffic. And so there's always conservatism that's going to be built in on unattributable traffic, which gives me some comfort too. Another thing, when the 12 months is up, the customers don't stop interacting with you, right? They don't start bringing money in. And you can work to optimize that, but regardless, there's some gravy in the past 12 months that's always there. And then the final thing is, if your cutoff is a 12-month return, and that's the most that you're willing to pay for new eyeballs that you're bringing in, your average cost is actually going to be quite a bit lower because you're going to bring lots of stuff in that doesn't cost there. That's just where you're going to draw the line and kill a campaign or kill a channel or kill trying something. We were talking a little bit earlier about testing things quick, cheap, and dirty. So if you bring something in that doesn't meet a 12-month return, but it's sort of close, for one thing, I'll tell you, most things when they don't work, they don't miss by 10%. They're like an order of magnitude more expensive than what is a reasonable cutoff, or 5 times more expensive. It's just not even in the ballpark, right? And those, you record your numbers, you set them aside, and you move on with life. But if they come in 20% higher than your allowable, and you haven't even given them much love yet, there's some experience and judgment in there, but you got to be able to look at it and go, wow, if I polish this up, if I put my best visual designer on this, my best user experience designer on this, how much better can they make that? And can I get that 20% back? There's a decent chance that it's true. The other related questions around how much should I spend? A lot of folks don't know their lifetime value. And so I usually build a conservative estimate. There's still usually plenty of money in the conservative estimate to go do some damage and get started on things, for one. For two, like I said, most of your ideas aren't going to miss by 20% or 10%. They're going to be 500% off. So if you start with an estimate that turns out to be 40% conservative, fine. You'll still find plenty of things that fall within there and you'll be happy. And later when you find out it was 40% conservative, you can move the bar up, go back to your completed list, and find all the things that would now fall under it, right? Maybe even find all the things that fall within 60%, because you know if you polish them and give them more love, you might be able to get them under the new bar. So I hope you're starting to get a feel for the mechanics of how things flow through there. People always ask what to do with virality in here. I say the same thing. If you can directly attribute the virality to the traffic that came in from that channel, take credit for it, right? If you've got a channel that brings in 0.2 users for every person that you brought in through that channel, take credit for that if it happens within the first 12 months. If you've got one that brings in 0.2 and one that brings in 0.6, you should be willing to spend more on the one that brings in 0.6. And spend more also, you know, it's for dollars, but it's also for your time and your love, right? And that is the most precious commodity at any startup. But so where you're going to make your investments, it should be more to something, a channel or a campaign that's more viral than another campaign. And then I've been talking about it, but in the beginning, lifetime value by campaign is usually too granular. It's too hard to measure, volume's too small. So I usually start off more on a channel approach. So SEO has this kind of lifetime value. I break SEO into brand SEO and category SEO. Somebody who was searching for your company name versus somebody who was searching for your industry. And they'll have typically different cohort curves. And so if I can, I want to look at cohort curves by channel in the beginning, because if I roll up to channels like that, I'll have enough data to get a decent read on it. In the long run, when you really get cooking with gas, you know, if you have big campaigns, there's no reason you can't roll up cohorts at the campaign level as well. Here you go, Mark. So I'll apologize for this chart first, and I know everybody can't read it, and that's okay. I'm happy to send it to anybody later, but I do want to talk through it because I get asked this a lot. So how do we know that the test is converged, that it's time to stop? How do we know how much traffic to funnel to a test so that we can get a converged answer and so we can have confidence that we're proceeding the right direction? And historically in Silicon Valley, we've always used confidence interval equations. If there are any real stat folks out there, I've had some good conversations that lead me to believe that a Bayesian approach would actually be better. But I think that A, the ship has sailed, and B, this is a lot better than not doing anything. And so for that reason, I'm sticking with the one that's known and the one that's common, maybe for the rest of my career. Goodbye. But so it looks nasty. I apologize. It's not actually that bad. So there's two sets of equations here. One is for what's called a binomial distribution. This is the most common one for conversion. So did somebody sign up or didn't they? It's a yes-no answer. There's only two choices in outcome. So it's called a binomial distribution. If that's what you're trying to measure in your A/B test, ignore everything below that continuous distribution title. There's just this equation here. It looks kind of bad. It's not actually that bad. I actually derived it so that you could use only the 4 core easy raw readings. And I did that because it's easier to code in SQL or Excel. There are other forms of the equation that look prettier and cleaner. I find this one really simple to get going and use. So with just those 4 numbers, how big is each sample and how many converted in each sample, you can plug into this equation. You get a z value out. And you look up in this table down here, that z value, and it gives you a confidence interval. Now, the way to read the confidence interval is there's an assumption that you're doing a test and you're getting an average reading, and there's some distribution of readings that you would get if you did that test again and again and again. And so I usually shoot for a 95% confidence interval. That's what I like to see. And what that says is that if this follows standard distribution rules, 95% of the time when you do that test, B really would be better than A. And it would win. Doesn't say it would win by double, doesn't say it would win by 10%, just that it would win, just that it would be better. And that's enough for me. And so historically, I've used this confidence interval equation. This continuous distribution is the same thing, but to measure something like, say, initial purchase amount, right? That isn't a yes or no answer. It's a dollar amount with many, many sort of a continuous distribution of possible values. Almost the same equation. You have to take variance into account. But besides that, so now you have to calculate a variance, not just a mean, if you will. But besides that, same process. You get a z value. You look it up in the same z table. And you say, here's the confidence I have that B really is better than A. The other thing that I always tell people is you can do this in advance, right? So if you're starting a new test and you think you're going to be ready to roll it out on Wednesday, you can say, wow, I want to be able to measure a 10% difference between the new test and the old test with 95% confidence interval. And you can go and fake in these numbers and see how much volume is it going to take for you to get 95% confidence if there's a 10% improvement from A to B. You can pick a 5% improvement, you can pick a 40% improvement, whatever you like. But you can get some feel for how fast you're going to converge based on how much volume you put in. And it won't take you too many times of doing that before you'll have a pretty decent sense of what to put in, how, and when. In practicality, a lot of tests come down to risk in terms of how much traffic you want to flow through things. If you got a radical new idea, you might not be happy running more than 10 or 20% of your traffic through. If you've got something that you like, but you really just, honest college try, don't know which one's better, you might run 50-50 so you can try to converge fast. And if you've got one that you know is better, it's the new design that you just did, it's clean, it's beautiful, you just want to run it in so that you can document the improvement that you got and what your new baseline is.
Because you're always right.
I'm not right that often, but you can run it. A redesign is a common one, but you could run it in at 80 or 90% and leave the old one on at 10%. And so a lot of times it's done in practical terms like that. The only other consideration to make around it is a lot of people's websites behave differently on weekdays and weekends. And depending on the relative, how much traffic do you get on the weekends and weekdays, I would be wary of rolling a test out on a Thursday, seeing a great improvement from A to B, killing off A, right? And then just using B based on weekend test results. If you have lower traffic then, and fewer conversions then, and possibly different behavior during the week. And I'd be much more inclined to want to let a test run throughout a typical week so you get appropriate weighting to each day of the week throughout the test. This isn't a perfect system, but I don't know. I've used it a long time, and I know lots of other people that have. And like I say, it seems to be a lot better than just looking at average numbers and scratching your head and wondering. The other thing people always ask me is, what should I test? And I point to a relatively new one from Sean Ellis, this equation that I love, not because it's mathematically correct, it probably isn't. It probably needs some exponents and some products and some cool stuff like that. But I like the simplicity of what it says. Conversion equals desire minus friction. This increased desire is positive, friction is negative. It will decrease your result. Now people can talk about, at this stage of life cycle, friction is more important, and that stage, desire is more important. And that's fine, and I'm good with those debates. I'm not saying the math is right, but I love the simplicity and the purity of the equation. And so I start there and start looking at desire, right? And how can I increase desire? And if you haven't read the behavioral economists, I highly recommend chasing them down and reading through them. They have some often counterintuitive ways of looking at the world in order to increase the desire for your product. Cialdini, to me, is the original. He was the first one I became a fan of. But Dan Ariely, Nir Eyal are out there as well. Solid work, well worth the read on desire. I wanted to give some examples of tests that I've done, so I'll tell you some entertaining, I hope, stories. Headlines, by the way, I mentioned because it's often one of the biggest bang for buck tests that you can do. It's often a place I will start. So what are the words in your headlines? Where are your headlines? What's the font? What's the size? What's the color? All that regular stuff. Very simple changes to make that can often swing conversion pretty hard. Why? Because a lot of people only read the headlines. They don't read the rest of whatever you put on the page. An authentic solution I put down there. This was an interesting one that happened a while ago. Sometimes I'm lucky when I'm wrong, by the way. And this was one of those cases where I was working with a company who found that if they got somebody to sign up for their regular newsletter, they were 400% more profitable. So 5 times as profitable as the people who didn't sign up for the newsletter. And it was like, we got to get people to sign up for this newsletter, right? And so I cranked out a really pathetically ugly PowerPoint spec for a new sign-up page. I didn't like the sign-up page they had. I wanted to try something different, right? My sign-up page was extremely weak. I was using like PowerPoint standard colors, PowerPoint standard shapes with standard radiuses. I wrote some text out really quick that I was kind of joking around, in it, but it was sincere and straightforward, and I was just trying to convey to the real copywriters the kinds of things and messages that I thought might work there. And handed the spec to the developers and to the designers, went along my merry way, right? 2 days later, the developers are done, right? They got this new page. They send me a link. I click the link and I look at it and I'm horrified. It looks like PowerPoint. The blue that's in it is not their brand's blue. It's PowerPoint default blue. Same with all the other colors in it. And the text is exactly my text. They've gone to painstaking lengths to copy the font that I used, even though that's not the brand's font. It was a perfect copy of my hideous PowerPoint page, but it was live and ready to go, and ready to go into their testing engine. The designers hadn't started yet. They were a little backed up at the time. That's fine. But so I was like, you know what? This is a little brand embarrassing. And like I said, right? Release first, polish later. So I said, why don't we just let it rip? And then the new design will come along soon and kick its ass, right? Cool. And so we let it rip and we threw it out there. And conversion of the page increased 5 times. It's the highest converting email sign-up page I've seen even still today. It was more than half of the people that saw that page signed up for the newsletter. It was incredible. It was very authentic. It didn't look like anybody was trying to slick you. It wasn't polished, right? Nobody was trying to pull wool over your eyes. But it was hideous, and it was embarrassing from a brand perspective as well. So we got a nicely polished version that came in, and we put it up there, and we lost half of the headway that we had made. And the polished one converted half as well. So sometimes being authentic and coming across as authentic can do wonders for helping with desire, because people will trust your message, and they'll want it more. Another mistake. I love telling about the mistakes because there's more of them. But I was at a financial institute, and the risk people, the underwriters, if you will, said, we want to find out why people are signing up for this financial service product. And we think that we'll be able to build a better underwriting model if we know why. And it will lead to more profitability down the road because we'll be able to underwrite them properly and gauge the risk properly, and they'll be more profitable. And me being a conversion equals desire minus friction guy that I am, I said, no. I said, you can't put a page into my flow. Every page is going to cost me 10, 20%, right? I think the YC article said 20%. I'll go along with it. It's close enough from my experience, too. I was like, no. Fought for a while. Eventually, I said, fine. I said, I will take 5% of our funnel volume for 1 month, and I'll send it through your flow where we ask them why they're coming in to sign up for this financial services product today. And being the testing guy that I am, I actually built 2 of those pages. Wanted to see which one hurt us least, right? And that's the one that I wanted to leave on, of course. And one of them did hurt us by about 10%, the traditional, right? And the other one boosted it by about 15%. Increased conversion, even though we were throwing something in their path, something that got in the way. So we went in and we started testing version after version after version. We probably tested 40 or 50 different versions. And we got one that gave us better than 20% lift on an acquisition funnel for financial services, which is that's a pretty big deal. Financial services products are expensive. So that was a big boost. We went out and finally, chased down and to figure out like what's going on here. Why are people getting through? And they thought that we were customizing and building a product just for them and just to fit their needs. So even if you're not going to respond to it, even if you're going to ignore it, ask them what they want. They're going to feel good that you ask them what they want. Over time, I would argue that you won't ignore it. That if you get a lot of people saying the same thing and those are profitable people, you will respond and you will come through. But even if you're not in the beginning, ask people what they want. It can make them think that you're paying more attention to them and make them desire the product more. Friction, the other piece, and it is true, there's a lot of friction out there in the world, and minimizing it is a worthy goal. This is something that should really be done by professionals. They're really good at it. Designers are really good at this and at minimizing friction. I'll give you things that I look at and look for, sort of at the top level, and common things that I'm passing along, but This is where professional help is extremely beneficial. For one thing, user experience testing is spectacular for identifying friction. It's not that great on the desire side. It turns out when you pay somebody to sit in front of you and help you, they want to be helpful. And they'll tell you what they think you want to hear. Not because they're evil or bad or want to lie or anything like that. They just can't help it. They're just good people and you just paid them. They want to pay you back. They want you to get your value for what you did. Even if they're doing it on a volunteer basis, they still can't help but lie on the desire side. But watch somebody try to find a button or try to figure out what a drop-down means. They're not lying about that. And so friction is a great thing to identify via user experience testing. I am a big fan of Steve Krug and sort of guerrilla testing on your own, just because I think you get so much benefit from it for such less cost and flow time than sort of going other routes. Cool. And then some big ones, some really big ones, some big enough ones that I'll put them on here even though I'm not a professional designer. Speed is huge. I'll give you another example, and this is also an example of faking the back end, right? I was working with a company that did a game. It was a Flash game to run on the web. And the way it worked, you went to their site and you downloaded the big Flash app. It was a couple megabytes. And the first thing in it was the sign up. So you had to sign up to play the game. And I'm scratching my head because they're getting people to click download, but the conversion to sign up, it just didn't look high enough, right? And so we said, let's build a plain HTML version of that sign up page. Just to take all the variables out of it, let's make it look exactly like the Flash page. Exactly. Pixel perfect, identical. But it's going to load 30 kilobytes, bang, right? And then after they sign up in that page, since our backend really doesn't work like this, we're going to download the Flash app, we're going to make them sign up again. And we knew we were going to lose some traffic and look stupid on that, but we wanted to measure what's the conversion of that first HTML page relative to waiting and getting the download later. And speed is so important. It's why you see Google Instant on search, right? That, like, they know, they get it too. But speed was so important that not only did we get 50% more signups out of the HTML, plain HTML version of the page, we actually had 10% more signups after giving them 2 in a row. So it, of course, caused us to go back and rebuild it with the signup in plain HTML outside of the Flash app. But it also speaks to why chasing down Ajax and other technologies that can speed delivery of things to people is often worthwhile. And it also should give you some ideas of, how can we test doing this, even if we don't really have the capability in the back end yet. Try to figure out what it's worth and where we should prioritize it on our list of things to build. Call to action, another one, ridiculously critical on the friction side and ridiculously neglected. I'm happy to see sort of the standard homepage emerging, right? Where you land on somebody's page. I think Square was one of the first examples I saw of this. And it just tells you, hey, here's your product. We're devoting everything to. Here's one product we're going to tell you about. Here's one call to action. And that's all there is, right? And the call to action for them is going to be consistent. If it's in the bottom right-ish on that home page, it's going to stay in the bottom right. You don't want to have to look for a call to action. We tested hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of buttons at NextCard for calls to action and flows around application flows. And for us, it was like, orange and red are action colors, right? There's a reason a bullfighter waves a red cloth, although I'm told bulls are colorblind, so I'm not sure about that really. But I like the analogy. But orange and red are action colors. I try to use them as sparingly as possible. So the only time you use them is on the thing that you really, really, really want somebody to do. If that's the only time you ever use them, people will learn that. They'll know, oh, that's what they really, really, really want me to do. And they'll make a point of looking for it on every page that they're on. You want that. That's good training. Shape is the other one. Anybody ever wonder why there's so many greater than signs right after submit, right after the call to action word, right? It's because those diagonal edges, I'm told our caveman brains see them better. Maybe they helped us see spears coming at us. I don't know. Whatever it is, they were a break in the horizon, I think, actually. Horizon was a horizontal line, and they were a break. A real designer should tell you this, not me, by the way. But anyway, but they do work. But the standard browser buttons, which load fast, going back to my speed and trying to balance things, don't have diagonal edges on them, right? when we tested buttons at NextCard, when there wasn't much of an issue for speed, buttons with triangular edges, sort of like the play button in an old tape recorder, right? Always beat rectangular buttons. And we're sure because of the diagonal edge. You want to make it work better? Make the point pointier. Pointy as you can. Want to make it even better? Put a little ribbon on the back edge so there's 2 points backwards back there too. Pointy things are dangerous. We notice them. We're afraid of getting poked by them, right? So at any rate, you get the idea. But so the compromise for a lot of folks to make something load fast, where use the standard browser buttons, the rectangles, and just put a greater than symbol. Standard ASCII characters. Doesn't cost you anything for images or other bandwidth space. But regardless, having that in the same place every time, not making people have to look to find what's the next call to action, what's the next thing I'm supposed to do, is worth an awful lot. There's all kinds of friction and inertia and reasons they don't want to complete your thing. So take as many of those as you can away for sure. Grouping, contrast, information architecture, it's the same kind of examples. So for me, once you've got somebody signed up, my goal is to make them a regular ongoing user and to increase those cohort curves, get them to be as steep as I can. For me, I've always looked at it as kind of, our product's like it's like designer crack, right? It doesn't work for everybody, but for people in our target market, it solves a big problem. It makes them feel a big release, relieved. They feel good after they see the problem solved, right? And so the key, if you're trying to be a drug dealer, you got to get somebody to use your drug and feel the relief and feel good, or they're never going to find out how great it is and how much it solves their problem, right? So same for us. Somebody comes in, you have to give them some of that relief. Show them the problem solved and let them experience that good feeling of, oh, wow, that problem's not as bad as it used to be, as soon as you possibly can. And get that as early into the experience as you possibly can. And get conversion to that to be as high as you possibly can. So it's a great place to A/B test. And you can A/B test around first-time user experience flows, just like you could in a conversion funnel. And it's a great place to usability test as well, because, again, the usability testing will identify friction points that keep them from getting to that point. Last one. The last one was about testing in your core product. So the cohort curves and optimizing and getting the feedback loop going on the cohort curve. So I wanted to show you what data sort of looks like when you test in a cohort curve. So you bring people on to your product here. They're going on as customers. Some of them are buying second things or coming back and re-engaging and bringing you more revenue and value. And then you run a test, right? So a portion of the people from this cohort, you show whatever you're trying to sell to increase engagement or profitability, and a portion you don't. And then you have two cohort lines that fork out from here. Hopefully the new one that you tested will result in a steeper shape and a steeper curve. But that's what you'd like to measure, and that's what you're trying to measure. If you're looking at lifetime value on a per user basis, attrition's baked into this number, right? So if you sell too aggressively and a whole bunch of your people walk away, then on a per user basis, you're not going to get the lift you wanted here because you lost a bunch of users. So that's conceptually what testing in a cohort curve looks like. Some interesting notes, though. You don't want to test your core product in an A/B test for ongoing users. The last thing you want is every time I log into your to the core product, there's a different nav. Or this new design came and then it was gone again 2 weeks later, right? But you can build messaging opportunities in your core product that you can easily test. You can easily test standard messaging like newsletters, activity feeds, so content that's just showing up in their email box. You can easily show things like tips and tricks, other products, people that like this, like that, to steal one from Amazon, right? And you can change the content that's in those, and you can test all kinds of different content in there. And going back to where do you want flexibility? Front-end content. It's perfect, right? That's what you want flexibility, and that's what you want to test anyway. So usually I'm trying to design and build something where I've got content that I can vary within, where I'm keeping my core product experience stable. And this is what I'd like to try to measure. On the core product, the only way to sort of test as you're rolling along, I mean, user experience testing is actually a great thing for the core product and for figuring out how to make your core product solve your customers' needs as well as possible. If you want to get some idea on measurements and how you've changed metrics by changing to a new version of your product or a redesign, that's when you go down the beta route, release to a limited audience first. There are biases in that, so don't just open it up to everybody. You always need a test and a valid control, right? So you need to take two populations, make the beta available to one of the populations but not the other, and then measure the behavior in the entire populations so that you can discriminate the difference due only to the beta version. Does that make sense? Hopefully. And I think that was all that I have for today. That's a lot of the common questions I get, and I hope you found it helpful. I did want to give one shout out to all of the Mo Bros that are out there sporting Mo's for Movember. Congrats to you guys. I copped out and shaved mine off to give this talk. So you guys are better guys than me, but I just wanted to give some props to the cause. It's worthy. Questions?
Have you ever come into an occurrence where the A/B test doesn't work for you, and you have to use something like a Monte Carlo test on it?
I mean, I want to keep things simple if I possibly can, you know? And so my preference would be to try to avoid multivariate as much as you possibly can. One thing I didn't talk about, but it's kind of important on A/B testing side, a lot of people think that you're testing A and B and trying to figure out is B better than A or is A better than B. I would look at an A/B test more as an opportunity to learn about your market, right? So let's say B is 10% better than A, but you find out that B is actually 40% better than A in the New York metro area, and for the rest of the country, it's 5% worse. Do you really want to switch to B? So it's a perfect place to use segmentation to look in and see, hey, is this resonating with one segment more than another? What does that tell me about how this message is resonating with those different segments? And can I go back and can I dream up a C now to get all the advantages of A as well as B? Or can I do something like segment the messaging that I give to different places in a way that hopefully isn't going to cause me too much management headache to get that result later? So I'm willing to segment and to go a lot deeper on the analysis side, but I would prefer not to have to do it's hard to manage that going forward as you get more and more forks on the presentation side. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Now that you're at Atlassian, you have the concept of like multi-sided marketplaces. How does that kind of change your perception or at all about lifetime value?
So the question was, now that I'm at Atlassian and we have a multi-sided marketplace, does it change my perception of lifetime value?
In terms of how you acquire traffic for different sides of the marketplace.
So it's a good question, and I didn't talk about this either, but a lifetime value is a little bit cold, in honesty. I don't think that it appreciates attrition as much as it should. And so I would probably put more weight on attrition and more weight on keeping people, even if my average lifetime value curve was a little bit lower. So attrition is something I'm going to watch really closely, and I think that's true here as well as everywhere else. Missy.
So just because I know how great you are when you set up teams, what would be like your ideal team at an earlier stage startup, given that you guys are resource constrained, into sort of the team that you had at Practice Fusion, which was pretty extensive? And how would you segment these different groups as far as putting them on different things?
Yeah, that's interesting. So everybody heard the question, right? For the camera, I guess. The question was, how would I compare the team for an earlier stage startup to the team that I built at something like Atlassian or that I had at Practice Fusion at a larger, more sophisticated effort, I think. Yeah, it's interesting. Early stage startup, you kind of need a small number of people to do a lot of everything. That said, there are some skills that you have to have some design talent. You have to have somebody to actually build these systems for you. And you have to have somebody to sort of manage these campaigns. And so a lot of times in early days, that's sort of how I look at the world. And you can borrow. You can use the same designer for growth as you're using for product. you can use the same developer for growth as you're using for product. And that's quite common, actually. But somebody to just look after growth, at least is always, even if that's me, that's fine, right? But somebody there whose only concern is growth and who is setting up these feedback loops and setting up success for the long-term future is important to me even at the early stage. As you get bigger, for me anyway, one of the benefits of working in a smaller group where everybody gets to do a little bit of everything is everybody gets to learn a whole lot. And everybody gets to be really broad. And when they come out, they can pretty much run a growth team, right? Even if they were just out of college in that team, if it's a small enough team and they truly get to work on everything, it's a big advantage to working at those kinds of companies. So for me, I want to leverage that at my big teams as well. And I want to say, hey, just because we're a bigger team, you should still be able to get the advantage of being able to run one of these teams, maybe not at as big a company, but run one of these growth teams for your next position. And so I am the kind of manager who will put a challenge out to the group and have them tell me how they're going to solve it. And so one of my core challenges that I like to throw at every group, especially the big ones, is how can you structure the group and how can you tell me to manage you so that you get that, right? And the coupons.com team did an interesting thing around that I'll throw out as an example because I thought it was a really fun one. There were a lot of people in the distribution space that wanted to know about search. But typically there's a search specialist, right? So we put the search specialist, if you will, on Google first. But then somebody else got Yahoo. And somebody else got Microsoft. They were separate at the time. And so all of a sudden now there were 3 people that got to learn search. And instead of one person doing it as their full-time job, there were 3. There was actually a 4th person too. So they had one rotation off. And so instead of one person spending all their time doing search and specializing, we now have 3 people, and actually a 4th in the rotation, that were spending a 4th of their time each, or a 1/3 of their time each on one of the search engines. And they rotated every quarter so that they could learn about the different ones. And they had to cross-train each other as part of the rotation, right? I didn't do any of this. They dreamed it all up. All I want to do is put the challenge out to the team that you should be able to design your job and design your manager so that you can get the same benefit of a small company out of a big company. And like, people are creative, man. They come up with stuff. Yeah.
So how do you go about getting feedback about why something works? I know some people use KISS insights, but that can be obviously, it can add friction. And you mentioned that when you added the additional underwriter page, that it increased conversion. How did you go about finding out why it did that?
Yeah, it's a great question. The question was, if something works or doesn't work, how do you understand why it works or doesn't work? So it's funny. I like to make sort of bets. I don't want real big stake bets, but I like to make bets on what's going to win and what's going to work, right? I usually bet a beer. It's not. But so whoever's right gets the beer bought for them on the bet. And it's funny. Everybody has their reasons why they pick on one or the other. And, you know, the fact is most of the time designs are compromises between a lot of things. And the relative value of one thing versus another is pretty hard to call, even if you've been doing it a long time. And besides that, you get, like the examples that I gave, you get these wild cards that come in from sideways that you just didn't see coming. But the funny thing is, once you have the data, if you kind of poke around it a little bit more and try slight variations and see, oh, does this one still poke the nerve, or it doesn't anymore? You can figure it out. You can kind of reverse engineer pretty well. A lot of times you can as soon as you get the data. And it's funny, everybody had their bet in, and then the results come in, and you go, oh, of course that one won, because this was better than that. But you didn't know that, until it ran. So once in a while you're stumped, but most of the time you actually know as soon as you see the numbers and you have a good idea why. Even though there's one main number that I'm looking at for apples to apples goodness, so to speak, the report cards that I build for these tests actually have a lot of things. So we'll look at bounce rates. We'll look at how much time people are spending on site. We'll look at other metrics, how many people are logging in. I didn't talk about this either, but you don't want to wait around 12 months to find out what somebody's lifetime value is, right? And so you try to model it. And so what's the shortest fuse thing you can model it by, right? And you start with maybe 30-day value. Then you look for things like, did they sign up for the newsletter a lot? Does that turn out to be predictive? Did they log in the day after they signed up? Did they log in the week after, the 30 days after? And you try to find whatever you can that's the twitchiest variable that reduces your uncertainty around lifetime value the most, and that's the one you want to go off of. So when you look at all of those different data points together, you can usually kind of call and you can understand why people are doing things. Sometimes still stumped, and you go back and, man, I've got a story, but I can't tell it without telling the company name, and so find me after. Yeah.
When you talk about the PowerPoint conversion page, and there was a sort of brand embarrassment, at what point, at what threshold do you say, okay, this is too embarrassing, I'll take the lower conversion, or put the ugliest thing out there that converts better than anything?
There's always a brand standard, but over the short run, to learn about how our market interacts with the test, the brand standard is lower. But over the long run, you have to have a brand standard in there. So like everything, the design is a compromise. And you have to figure out how you can live with yourself on the brand standard and still capture as much as of the upside as possible. One of my favorite examples for that one, we had early days of internet. You guys will think this is funny. We were getting a group of banner ads together, and we had 8 or 10 banner ads that we were going to run, and spending a decent ad budget at the time at that particular company. We're going to throw $100,000 or so at each banner design. So we put them, hey Megatron. So we put them in front of a focus group. This is the early days of web. There was no A/B testing yet, right? And we threw it in front of a focus group, and we talked to these people that were representative of the market about how they liked all the different banners. And they liked this beautiful banner. I think it had clouds and soft, pleasant things on it. And then, because it was just as easy for me, right? I was really just barely off being an engineer. And so I, of course, ran all 8, right? Throw some weight at all of them and just see what happens. And the soft, fuzzy cloud design came in almost last. The winner was the ugliest design. It used 2 colors, red and black. So it was red, black, and white, the entire banner. It was pretty hideous, pretty embarrassing, right? But we learned, and we did one other focus group test, and it was not quite as badly predictive, but it still wasn't good, and that was the end of focus group testing. We just started A/B testing like crazy from then on. So we didn't stay with the red and black one long term, but it taught us things. It taught us things about focusing. It taught us things about using the color red sparingly and using it to grab people's attention. So I'd be willing to lower your standard for a short period if it means you're going to learn something about your market and how your market's going to engage with what you've built. But over the long run, you do have to have some standard. And you might learn enough to where you can get the advantages quantitatively back and still meet your brand standard. Make sense?
So you mentioned twitchy data a couple times. Could you expand on that just a little bit more?
Yeah. So what's the good example without using a company name?
Usernames.
So if you've got, say, a SaaS product that you wanted to work with, you get paid more if you have one product at your company and it has one monthly fee for a SaaS product. I'm just trying to simplify this for the example's sake. The question, was examples of twitchy data. Really, ultimately, how much you make in the way that I just simplified it is just a factor of how many months does that person stay on as a customer, right? The longer they stay on, the more they pay you the monthly payment. So it's just attrition-based. But you're not going to know what that attrition curve really looks like for a long, long time. And so can you look at other behaviors inside? Can you look back in time? Facebook has a famous one for this, actually. Facebook said if you sign up and you put 7 friends in. You're good. You're going to be here for a while. We don't have to worry about pushing you quite as far, right? And so it was a much twitchier one than saying, hey, once somebody's on for 6 months, or once somebody is a 4 times a month user on average for 6 months, then we know they're probably here for a while. But that's going to take you 6 months to find out. You might be able to get somebody to sign up for 7 users the second day. In a financial service companies that I was at once, we found out that people that signed up for online banking were worth more, right? They had traded less. And so we tried to get them to sign up for online banking as fast as we could, right? Because then we knew that we had them on the higher lifetime value curve. We had these great debates about, was it the chicken or the egg, right? Were more valuable people more likely to sign up for online services, or did signing up for online actually make them higher? So we did what you'll probably expect me to say we did. We did an A/B test. And to half of them, we pushed them and made them sign up really fast, and to the other half, we didn't. And it turned out that even when we forced them to sign up and like ran them in there and corralled them into signing up for online, they were still worth more. So examples of twitchy data, yeah. Some people know if you logged in the second day. And so that's not bad. That's a one-day turnaround on a lifetime value. You don't have to nail a lifetime value either. You're just trying to reduce uncertainty around it, and you're just trying to be able to discriminate between a good channel and a bad channel, right? Because you don't want to get fooled into buying a lot of conversions someplace that you think will scale, and it turns out nobody logged in the second day. All these customers they sent us, they're not going to be worth anything. Is that?
Does, yeah, thanks.
Cool. Yeah.
In terms of the virality, are there any standard steps to help your product go viral?
Build a lust-worthy product, right? Look at the people who've been very successful with virality, particularly with paid products, I would say. So look at Dropbox. They did a pretty good job there, right? Look at PayPal. I think that was the original sort of tell-a-friend program back when, and it did a pretty decent job too. If you look at their models, one interesting thing is both of them have aspects of their product which help prevent gaming. And so if you don't have a way to easily prevent gaming, it's going to be harder for you to use paid virality anyway. Refer a friend, paid virality is hard to do if you don't have a way to prevent gaming. If you're a company like Practice Fusion, you know if somebody's a doctor or not for real. So you could filter out for a referral. Hey, if you refer your next door neighbor who's not a doctor, we're probably not going to pay you, right? But beyond that, build that great product that everybody loves. Make them want to share it with people like them in their market. Make it easy to share it for people like them in their market. Go ahead and look at the viral coefficient equations. Getting them to share it with more people will up your odds of conversion per share is fixed and constant, and it's worth going for. A lot of people neglect cycle time when they're looking at virality, but it's really, really, really important. So if you have a 1-month viral coefficient, it can be 1/10 the 1-year viral coefficient, and it's the same. So try to increase cycle time, or reduce cycle time, sorry, and make the viral cycle work as fast as you possibly can. And that's about all I got. I don't know a lot of people that go after virality hard as a way of growth. I think they go after that drug addict side. They go after giving you the fix and getting you to really, really like the product so that you want to tell your friends. Yeah, Missy.
Just one last. So I realize that LTV is a good measure, but often when you're just starting out and you're really brand new, you're sort of thinking of what your CAC is going to be, your customer acquisition cost, and you don't really know what your lifetime value. You just have no idea. To model that out is really hard. So what do you tell early startups when they're just saying, yeah, I mean, do I want to spend like $10 to get a user in, $5, $3? And how is that going to play out for the first couple months? How do you just get started with that?
If you really, really, really have no idea, like even in the ballpark, I might not suggest paid advertising as a first avenue to go down. And I would stick to investments of your love and precious time. Maybe for starters. That's me. No rule's absolute, right? I like to keep the mind open, but I think it's easy to get. You can be pre-revenue and still have an idea of what the value of a customer is going to be long term. If you have any ideas on how you're going to monetize, you can pick one that you feel most confident about. It may or may not be the one that you actually end up with, but there's a decent chance. And again, you don't have to nail it. You just need something in the ballpark so you can hit it. Build something conservative would be my recommendation so you can sleep well at night and so that you can sell it to your CFO.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Where is the line between growth and marketing, and should they be separate teams?
It's interesting. The whole growth hacker thing. So the question was, where's the line between growth and marketing, and should they be separate teams? I think it's unlikely that they should be separate teams, at least to me. I think the growth hacker name maybe came about because historically there were a lot of brand marketers that were broadcasting and using broadcast-type media. In technology sectors, I think you're seeing a lot more direct media being applied and directly measurable media and marketing techniques. And I think there were folks that wanted to be able to differentiate between marketer type A and marketer type B. It's a lot faster to say growth hacker than it is to say, the kind of quantitative marketer that also has a decent tech understanding. And so I think it's a simplification and a condensation to make the explanation sort of easier. And so I say it's mostly one or the other, but more and more, everybody wants that, at least in tech, more and more. Everybody wants that quantitative sort of marketer that has some tech understanding too and has some decent quantitative skills. Yeah?
What is like the process you take to actually generate ideas? Because a lot of examples you've given are associated with, changing the shape of a button or focusing on SEO or, optimizing like the different pages that people can go through. But, when Uber thinks about like doing an ice cream truck, right, and measuring the success there, like certainly there are ways to measure the success after the event, but do you have a process or like a protocol to even like generate those types of ideas?
Yeah, so one thing I love about using an Agile sort of flow, sorry, the question was, what's the process for generating ideas? Sounds like primarily you're interested in around new eyeballs coming in, which I think is a great question. And so I like to keep a very transparent backlog so that anybody in the company can see it. Anybody in the company can throw ideas into the queue. And the team will pick them up and execute on them and prioritize them. But I like to keep it transparent and open and sort of in the spirit of brainstorming to some degree, in the spirit of openness to another degree. I think of the idea generation process more like a VC portfolio. It's not my personal savings portfolio, right? I really only need one bet to pay off my entire investment, right? If I get two, great. My LPs are going to love me. But I really only need one to pay back the entire investment of time and energy and love that I have put in. And so I'm going to err on the side of fast and things that I can test quickly in the beginning. And again, I'm going to try to fake stuff if I can, because I just want to find out what those ones are that are going to return my entire portfolio of effort investment to me. And then the sky's the limit. Some things are hard to measure, I bet the Uber van was pretty tough to measure. Now, you can put coupons on there and stuff to attempt to measure it, but some channels are inherently harder to measure than others, and I don't have great advice for those, honestly. At some point, you got to get your gut. Yeah.
Following up on that, what are some of the eyeball mechanisms that have surprised you on the upside, that have done better than you expected?
Man. There's just new ones coming in all the darn time. I'm going to sound old, but I am, so that's cool. But the question was, what are some of the awareness or eyeball finding mechanisms that have surprised me with their volume or scalability? Television kind of blew me away with the scalability. I'm going to pick an old media, right? Everybody knows television's big. When I was at coupons.com, we ran television ads, but we measured them as a direct media device, right? And we invented a brand, couponsuzy.com, that we only advertised via the television channel. So it was 100% directly attributable. There might have been spillage to coupons.com, but I doubt it. We didn't mention it anywhere. We didn't talk about it anywhere in the commercials, right? And, everybody knows television is big. But most channels, when you go in and say you dip your toe in the water and try it a little bit, you can get it's almost reverse scale, right? You can get a decent price on a little bit of that media. And then when you go, wow, that worked great, we'll take 10 times more, they go, well, you can't get 10 times more at that price. That was just this little special pocket over here. It's going to cost you 50% more if you want to buy 10 times more volume. And I expected television to be the same way, but it kind of wasn't. It just had this huge scale at fixed constant costs. And it wasn't my cheapest channel, but it wasn't my most expensive either. So at some point, if you just wanted to crank up volume, like, wasn't necessarily a bad place to go and a bad way to go. In the beginning, honestly, I didn't think SEM was going to be so super spectacular. But Google did a really great job with quality score. Like, hats off to them for what they did there to make that a relevant channel that people actually pay attention to and make it work. I didn't expect it. I thought it would just get numerically gamed, and there was no way that they could control that with mechanisms like quality score. So back in those days, there was that, right? At one point in time, I said, mobile can never actually convert, mobile advertising. And so far, I'm still right about that. But I expect to be wrong soon. So I guess things do change over time. And things that start off looking not so great sometimes evolve pretty nicely, you know? I didn't see Pinterest getting as big as it was going to get. I really didn't. I liked it. I liked it from the first time I saw it. I guess I thought I was the only visual guy in the world. You always sound stupid when you say these things later. But, you know, it's the truth. Yeah?
So for an early stage startup with, like, let's say 15 engineers, when you think about all this stuff, there's always this argument about build versus buy. Do I want to build all these testing tools myself, or do I want to just pay HubSpot or something like that? How do you think about that trade-off? And for you personally, what are the tools that you like using the most?
So the question is, how do I think about build versus buy, and which tools do I personally buy, mostly, it sounds like. I like Optimizely. I like Visual Website Optimizer on the sort of segmentation and visual testing side within the funnel. For tracking tools, I like looking at my Apache server logs and structuring them into data myself, as crazy as that sounds. I don't think it's that hard, and it gives you a really flexible system without too big a data schema. Someday I got to publish that standard schema. I'm really shocked that nobody's built that standard product yet. I don't know, I don't go outside for a ton, you find. I think before you can afford seats on ad exchanges when you're small, you need a partner there. I personally have enjoyed working with AdRoll for that, and they do have seats on all the exchanges that I want to get access to. But that's just not a scalable thing. You can't go out and buy seats if you're not spending $1 million a month on media. So yeah, I mean, there are some products out there that I use, but I like to build a lot, even in early days. I like Google Analytics because it's so fast and easy to turn on, but you have to beat that conversion thing. You know, you have to be able to join your cost to lifetime value or to lifetime revenue, or you're just going to get burned in the marketplace if you're trying to scale and if you're trying to use any paid media. Yep.
How do you attribute cost?
Sorry?
How do you attribute cost as far as like an attribution?
Yeah, how do I attribute cost was the question. For as much as I can directly, right? I want to tag on the inbound to the website, and I'm going to attach that tag to the visitor, to the cookie, to the session ID. I'm going to join straight through to users. If I get to a login point, I can join users across platforms, across machines, across browsers. And I'm going to try to do all that. And I can join across cookie deletes if somebody's logging in and giving a user ID, right? And so I'm going to try to do that. And I'm going to try to join all of those things across to get one view of the revenue that was brought in from that original cost that was tied to that original query string in the tag when they got passed over. It's a little bit different for mobile, a little bit harder to do. And then the tricky ones are ones like PR, right? Because you can measure a bump in unattributed traffic the day that TechCrunch article came out, right? And so you know how much volume was there, but you don't know which volume. And unless your conversion and all your regular metrics are super stable, you don't know, was it a good day on the stock market so your conversion on the whole went up? Or did the TechCrunch traffic that came in really skew your conversion badly? And so that's the interesting one that you got to kind of arm wave a little bit and dance a little bit with. But so that's me. What's that?
One more question.
If there's one more, we can do one more. If there's not, we don't have to.
Okay, follow up on the last one. How do you figure out how to attribute retargeting to get people to come back and spend more with you? So they've already come to you, you paid for the initial acquisition, and then you want to pay to get them to spend more. That gets really tricky.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Mark asked how to attribute retargeting costs. And if you really want to get down on the nuts and bolts of it and try to measure it, which is good to do once if you have enough volume to do it, segment the population you're about to retarget, right? So you got a bunch of people that came in from TechCrunch, right? They're just unattributed traffic, sorry. It was a bad example, really. But you have a bunch of traffic that came in, take half of it and run retargeting at that half. The other half, don't run retargeting at that half. And see what the longer tail of conversion looks like for both of the pieces. You need a little bit of volume to do it. In the beginning, you probably can't. So in the beginning, I'm probably just going to retarget. And I'm going to look at incremental costs, and if it seems relatively low compared to upfront costs, I'm going to do it. Retargeting's hard if you're in the high volume business, right? Coupons makes like a dime for every coupon that's printed. So I always joke that you got to count a lot of dimes, right? And so it's hard to make things like retargeting work there. But if you're a Practice Fusion and you've got a customer that monetizes very well over time, like a $2 CPM for retargeting that you're going to spend, and another 15% that if you're me, you're going to give AdRoll or somebody on a contract to run the seats for you, it's fine. Well, thank you again for taking the time tonight.